All right, hello everyone. How are you doing today? I always start by acknowledging that UBC's Vancouver campus is located in the traditional territory of the Musqueam peoples and recognize that you are joining us today from many lands whose ancestral caretakers deserve our respect and admiration. And we now have another group of adventurous students who are delighted to share their lessons from an intense educational trip abroad. The talk is titled Common Ground, Communities, Conservation, and a UBC Field School Experience in South Africa. Our brave speakers are Thomas Gao, who's joining from in the Zoom, and Roberta Gonzalez. They both come from the Urban Forestry Program, and Abby Herman and Ella Holm from Natural Resources Conservation. They will talk more about themselves during the presentation, but a clear common denominator that I can see is how the South Africa Field School led by David Bunn and Melissa McHale has really changed their lives forever. I really think so. They formed the second group of undergraduate students presenting in this event, and I am really happy about that because that is why we called it the Teaching and Learning Seminar Series. So undergrad students provide us with incredibly valuable first-hand information about how these different experiences have shaped their careers and will continue to shape their lives. I want to thank all of the colleagues who make this event possible with the support of the Dean's Office. We have a large team of people doing design, marketing, technology, logistics. You have no idea how many people are involved in a situation like this. And this one in particular, a bit difficult because it was canceled by the bus trip, the snow, I don't know what. All of the things happened at the same time, so we had to move it. So thanks for your patience. I also want to thank the Global Skills Opportunity Funding from the Canadian government, who has alleviated the cost of some students to travel, and our very own global program at UBC for their financial support and coordination for all these international field schools. It's a massive amount of work for that to happen. And finally, thanks to all of you for coming here and for people joining online who did not get free lunches. And so it's an extra effort. And so I am happy to see you enjoy this talk, enjoying these delicious sandwiches as well. So all yours, the floor.
Yes, so just to back up what Andre said, thank you so much for being here. You reveal yourselves to be a resilient audience. I mean, you've been through 2 cancellations. So thank you very much for being here. We're very proud of this program. It's one of a number that are really good. The Ecuador program, Chile program, the Europe program. It's a teaching and learning seminar, as you'll hear. I've done a lot of study abroad programs in my life. I've enjoyed every one of them. This one is very special. And I don't think I've ever had as good a one. A lot of that has to do with the backup we get from Go Global. The problem with study abroad generally is to teach field methods and deliver real science. Most study abroad delivers smoke and mirrors science. You know, it's like sort of fake stuff in the field. What we have at UBC now, with the forestry connection with Africa and other continents, is undergraduate students delivering science at a very high level in the field. And I think you're going to see some of that today. So we have 4 people, one of whom is in China. He'll be piping in Thomas Gao. But I want to begin with Abby Herman, who'll give you an overview of the program.
Hey guys, I'm Abby Herman, and as David mentioned, I will be giving an overview. I was given the impossible task of giving an overview of this program, this month-long program in South Africa. So I'll be giving you, I'll be telling you about where we went, what we did, how we did it, and oh gosh, I hate this. I'm gonna stand over here. I don't like. Okay, cool, awesome. So I'll be telling you where we went, what we did, and how we did it, and most importantly, why it was so impactful. And also, as a natural resources and conservation student, I wanted to also touch on all the different conservation management areas that we had the privilege to witness firsthand. So I will be talking about that. But before I get into it, I just wanted to give a brief overview of why I decided to apply to this program and what it meant to me. So these photos on your right, are photos of my grandparents. They met and got married in Zambia. My mom was born in Malawi, and my aunt was born in Eswatini. So already off the bat, I've had a lot of connection with the southern countries of Africa. And whenever I hear from their stories and see their photographs, it's never really about the wildlife. It's not about the land. It's always about the people and the connections and community they made in that section of their lives. So that is what I was looking for when I found out about this program. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to connect with people. And the moment I met David and Melissa and heard about this program, I just knew that was going to be inevitable, having those connections. And I found along the way, I learned also a lot more through that, not through lecture slides, not through textbooks. I learned a lot more from conversations and experiences and relationships. So I just wanted to highlight that, like what this program really became for me. All right, so we're going to start. Again, impossible task. I ramble too, so I'm sorry. But really impossible to talk about all the memories we made and all these little stops. But we landed in Johannesburg and drove the first day to our first stop in Skakuza. We stayed at a research station called Skakuza Science Leadership Initiative. And yeah, our day was full of early morning game drives, lots of coffee, amazing wildlife left and right. And already off the bat, we're in a national park. So we're learning through that perspective from our driver and soon-to-be friend, Thomas, and also our master student and soon-to-be friend, Shianeo. They were giving us a whole bunch of knowledge from their perspectives on this area. So already off the bat, really cool. We were having a lot of fun, but we're also doing a lot of field work, which was still fun. But we had, this is where we had like our initial methods figured out with the JEDI surveys and the camera trap surveys, which luckily Ella and Thomas will talk about. And we also had incredible lectures from David about like the history of the area, and then from people who were like living and working in the park. So we had a really amazing lecture from Fire College's Navashin governor, and also from Lawrence Kruger. He kind of gave us like the foundation of savanna ecosystems, which I haven't really been exposed to as much in my forestry classes. So it was awesome to learn about the savannas and grasslands and actually be there and see it and touch it. And yeah, before I move the slide, I just wanted to really mention that this program is amazing because of us being able to see Kruger National Park at eye level. We have a really unique experience that we are able to leave the game drive vehicles and get to see and do field work and really important work out in the field. So already off the bat, we're having the time of our lives. So next slide. Okay, our next stop is, we're out of the park, actually. We're in an area called Timbavati Safari Lodge. And this really bad map that I provided for you it doesn't show that there's a little section right here is full of private game reserves. So they are still just like little gated areas of where people can still do game drives, but they're not inhabited as much. But we stayed in an area that wasn't private game reserves, kind of complicated, but I just had to mention that because we did end up staying in a private reserve. And through this trip, we had a lot of perspectives of the private game reserves as well, because we got to venture out with the black mambas on their reserve, and then we did some game drives as well. So really interesting, really cool stuff, and it's already very different conservation-wise. And yeah, we stayed in the beautiful mud huts and had the time of our lives. So the next stop, which is the next slide, we stayed at Lataba Rest Camp. We drove up through Kruger again. Still having continuous amazing encounters with the wildlife. That was my favorite one, with the wild dogs. And then I remember this stop being really influential for field work because we were finally getting a hang of it and not like wasting a lot of time, being more efficient. And that was awesome. And we were getting really good at like the tree identifications, which was tricky at first. And then also the highlight of this trip was definitely the end, which we did a bush braai, which David and Melissa invented, where we have dinner and barbecue and cook the meat out in the middle of the African bush, which isn't ideal in my opinion. I was kind of scared a lot of the time for my back to the bush, but it was amazing, and we had a lot of really intimate conversations, and I could just tell already this is my second family. So that's all I wanted to say with that. And then last slide. Apologies here. I was only allowed 5 slides, so again, impossible task for me. But I wanted to mention these last couple ones really quick. And luckily, these guys are going to tell you more too. So our last stop in Kruger was in Puna Maria, really high biodiversity with birds, which was really fun for me because David converted me to become a birder at this point. And then we did go to the edge of Kruger and we saw the border to Mozambique across the river. That's the top photo right there. And then amazing camera trap work here in the fever tree forest. Highlight of my camera trap experience. And then our second to last, we went to Chula Camp, which David and Melissa established. And that is also where we spent our couple nights with our homestay families in HaMakuya. So this perspective is also very different from what we have been experiencing. We're talking to these people who are outside a national park and most likely has been displaced from too. And already off the bat, like, it's not just speaking with them. We were talking, we were eating, we were cooking, we were playing, we were laughing. And it was just a very, very unique and amazing experience that we all took a lot from. So again, I could talk forever about that, but I'm not going to because we have Roberta. And then lastly, we stayed at the last star at the bottom. We went all the way back down and stayed in a private game reserve. So very interesting, just very dynamic conservation management areas already. And at this point, we're different people. Like we're all really close, make amazing connections with people in the program and throughout. And it can get emotional over it, but it brings me a lot of joy reliving it. So I hope that gave you a quick and insight on our life-changing journey through the conservation management areas in South Africa. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Abby, for this awesome overview. And hello, everyone. My name is Roberta. I'm in my 5th year urban forestry and just finished my studies. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the less academic part of the trip, the community parts, the community engagements, and also some experiences and memories I have. So a bit, why did I decide to join the program? I went to South Africa as a kid with my family and I was 12. And I just remember I fell in love with it and I always wanted to go back, and this experience popped up and I said, I can't miss it. So I went, and indeed I fell in love with it again and can't wait to go back again. I think all of us really just wait for the time we can go back like hell. And yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about the homestay experience we had and also some of the people we met. And yeah, next slide. So a bit about the Black Mambas, which are this amazing group of women we had the opportunity to meet. They work full-time on protecting rhinos from poaching. They look for traps, which we call snares, like the iron traps. They go completely unarmed because of their philosophy of valuing life. So we learn a lot about the complexities of rhino poaching and how it's not that simple, that poachers also have their families. They do this many times out of necessity. And yeah, they are an inspiration for their community, for young women too. And they are really powerful, and it's really inspiring listening to their stories, to their experiences and how their own lives changed after they joined Black Mambas. They got a bunch of international awards for their work. So it was really cool, this experience with them. We actually got the chance to go like patrolling an area, like sweeping the area to look for crabs. And we ended up finding a rhino crab. We understood how it worked and how like common it is. So it's a reality shock, but also really, really cool experience. It was truly like life-changing too. The next slide. Yeah. So the homestays were another part of the trip towards the end. We got to stay 2 nights we were spread in different villages in the HaMakuya region. And they speak language. We learned a few words. It's so hard. So we had a translator come with us. And we got to learn like about their lifestyles, their daily lives, the things that make them happy. We exchanged many experiences with them. Like we met so many people. This is like me with my translator. We keep in touch to this day. It's one of those things where like just traveling to South Africa, you can't get the chance to meet so many people like that. And we've had so many kids in the village too. And like with our homestay mother too, she was such a sweetheart. And it's just like very emotional to be there and like experience so much of their ways and also exchange. We showed them music. They showed us music. We danced together. It was really fun, really cool experience. And this is like where we slept these 2 days. And yeah, many different foods, many different rhythms, and the language. It was just very intense and a lot. And it was beautiful. Next slide. So I'm sorry for my clustered slides. I thought photos can speak more than I can, but just a few things that we try. So these are mopani worms. These are some things that like they love it, and I had to pause my vegetarianism to try it. And it's actually not that bad. Just the head is a bit crunchy, but apart from that, it wasn't that bad. And the pup she makes like every single day she makes fresh pup, which is this like corn. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. You just get a bit. And this is a baobab fruit, which is really cool. It's something I've never tried anything like that before. It's like sour candy, but really dry. And it's just things that are really hard to describe. And we try to help our homestay mother with her daily tasks, like chopping firewood. And we failed at everything we tried, but at least we tried. I tried helping her carry water. And this was, I think the best part of the trip for my translator. She laughed so hard at me trying to pick up the 20-liter bucket and put it in my head. And this one was empty, but I was already struggling. And yeah, she laughed so hard she cried. And every time she looked at me, she would start laughing about it. And yeah, it was just one of the most like memorable experiences I have and really special. And also you never get an opportunity like this to like be in the community and like just meet them and like talk to them. And it was great. It was really beautiful. And just trying to wrap up like our experience of meeting people there. Like was my translator. Chia is there. Like Chia, it's hard to explain, like summarize Chia for us, but she was like an assistant to the program too. But she became really close friends with all of us. Like we created like a lifelong connection with her, and we all miss her a lot. And it was just like great learning from her and exchanging experiences with her. And she taught us a lot about the language too. She is from the HaMakuya region. And Thomas, our driver, he's just like he's an encyclopedia of like animals and savannas. He just knows so much. And he taught me a lot of Tsonga too. I taught him a bit of Portuguese, but he already knew a lot because his friends are in Mozambique too. And a lot of Brazilian tourists also go there. So he knew quite a few words. And our cook, she was so great, Mary. And I learned also like to play this crazy board game, like this ancient board game called Morabaraba, which seems simple, but I never won anything, but it's really interesting to learn. And so you just like get to meet people, create these connections. And it was just so special. This program is so unique in this way that you actually get there and you feel part of it in some way. So yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap up because of my 8 minutes. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you. And pass on to.
Hey everyone, I'm Thomas. So unlike some of the more captivating stories you've heard, I didn't come into the program knowing why exactly I wanted to go to South Africa, but that's fine. That leaves a lot of room for self-discovery, and sometimes it ought to be better that way, as I found out. So my main motivation for going then was to just get out of Canada, since I've been stuck there for about 4 years due to the pandemic. So 3-week program in South Africa, guided by the expert in the region, seems like a perfect escape and a very worthwhile investment. And it turned out to be so good that I'm here talking about it today. So for my part, I'll walk you through the more technical components of the course, particularly the NASA involvement and the JEDI work we did across the Kruger National Park region. Next slide, please. So I remember it was our first info session that David had mentioned something about the NASA involvement in the program, and I was caught off guard with it because you don't come across NASA affiliated things too often in your daily lives. And I was guessing the depth of meaningful involvement of NASA in this program, especially since we're all undergraduate students. So when David explained his NASA grants on developing an ecological forecast system for the South African savannas and how we will be able to contribute it throughout the course, my interest to go was absolutely locked in. Next slide, please. So in order to develop this ecological forecast system, JEDI, which is a spaceborne large footprint full waveform LiDAR, that was, I believe, on the ISS, is used with other remote sensing platforms, such as the Landsat series of satellites, to give us a whole new dimension of data to better our decision-making and conservation. So we were mainly interested in ground truthing the JEDI shots because JEDI was created to survey the world's above-ground biomass, and we wanted to find out if its claims can still stay true in the South African savannas, where the vegetation structure looks very different. Next slide, please. So to do that, here we have a sample of what our fieldwork protocol looked like for ground truthing. So these are only the 3 pages out of the entire booklet. So this was developed by Steve Filippelli of Colorado State University, and it aims to capture the entire context of the area covered by a JEDI shot, which is, I think, a circle 25 meters in diameter. That means we collect a geographical location, landscape characteristics, imagery, attributes of vegetation present, and many more information. Next slide, please. And next, I'll walk around through what capturing all this information took us. So we worked in teams where everyone was assigned to a role to avoid confusion, and the roles rotated every other side so everyone can have an understanding of the process in its entirety. So first, we would use a Garmin GPS unit with all the JEDI shots interested loaded to guide us to a general location. So as you can see on the top left, we loaded all the stuff on field maps, and we highlighted the interested JEDI shots in red. So as we get around to the general vicinity, we would then use Trimble DA2, which is a differential GPS, to accurately locate and establish the center of the JEDI shot. And then we put down a chaining pin to establish that. So by then, context including position of the landscape, date and time, personnel, equipments used are written down for standardization. Okay, so from there, we used compasses, tape measures, and flags to establish the boundary of the site. We then recorded tree distance, azimuth, and height using a compass and a laser rangefinder. And visual estimation of vegetation cover in every stratum is also recorded. Exhaustive photography of the site is also done at the plot center, cardinal directions, and ordinal direction facing both outwards and upwards. Next slide, please. So with all these data on hand, I wasn't sure how, as an undergraduate student, can produce some of the findings that are useful to the field, since usually all the basic findings are probably already done by other academics in the field. However, after scanning through existing literature on ground truthing JEDI data, I realized there is indeed a void to be filled in the real ground truthing. And with the data on hand, it can be done. So I think at the time, existing studies mainly focused on using airborne lidars to truth Jedi. So this process uses a program called a Jedi Simulator, which simulates a full waveform from point cloud data collected by most commercial lidars. However, the program itself is validated on another existing full wave LiDAR system. So that would be NASA's Airborne Land Vegetation Light Sensor. So there isn't actually a direct link from Jedi to ground truth data in this method. So that's why I decided to look into how accurately the heights are measured. And the relative height, as I'll refer to as RH metrics, is what give us these numbers. So RH give us a height at which a certain quantile returned energy is reached relative to the ground. So say RH 95 is height of 95% quantile of energy is returned, and RH 98 is height at 98% quantile energy is returned, and so on. So current papers have stated ranges from RH 95 to RH 98 as the ideal metric. So I settled on testing RH 95 to RH 99 metrics to see how well they are correlated to our ground truth data. Next slide, please. So after some simple analysis, mainly looking at how correlated different RH metrics and their biases are against our ground truth data, it turns out that RH 98 is the best correlated RH metric to ground truth data across all of our plots. So the best RH value to use, therefore, did not change across serving, say, old growth forest and sparsely vegetated South African savannas. And the bias of the height measured with Jedi became more random at higher RH, which also aligns with existing studies where noise is introduced as you go higher in RH values. So there was also this interesting low bias cluster identified in vegetation between 3 to 7 meters tall, which confirmed a previous claim that Jedi cannot reliably detect vegetation under 2 meters due to its wavelength use, and that the most accurate height surveyed is between 3 to 15 meters. Next slide, please. I also plotted the biases of all RHs across all Jedi shots and found that the bias between different RHs is consistent within the same plot and likely across the geographical region as well. So for example, you can see that both plot 7 and 8 are nearly identical in their biases, as they're both near an open waterhole with no shrubs despite being far apart from each other. So therefore, with these findings, we can finally confirm the capability and limitations of Jedi applications in South African savannas, with arguably, I want to say, the most comprehensive and accurate ground truth data to date. And there's a lot more I could write about with the abundance of data we were provided, but alas, the word limit has prevented me to not overwork myself and David, who had to mark everything by the end of the course. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I think this is such a rare opportunity for us undergraduate students to be able to contribute meaningfully to a project in real world. So unlike most of the assignments you only do for the sake of not filling the course, I was really excited to work because knowing what my discoveries could mean something outside of the confines of a typical school program. And I think the fieldwork components is really cool. So operating all these equipments and looking at the protocol gave me a good idea of how to come up with the methods. And I definitely gained technical skills that can aid in my future works. And also, the learning doesn't stop at the end of the course. So with all the data, as I mentioned, you could do more than just handing in an assignment if you have the time and interest exploring further. So with all the interesting relations I saw, I could have done patterns of biases, what causes the outliers in data points, and many more topics to explore. And honestly, it's not much field work. It's not too much field work, but every bit of it is like really meaningful work. So that balances out the guilt of like going on all the fun game drives, activities, all that stuff. Since I remember like when it was our first info session, David specifically said, this is not your typical program and it will be intensive, but I found it really balanced. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Ella Hume, and I'm the final presenter from the students who have been on this experience. And I just want to take you through a few things about the camera trap studies that we were doing, which is in correlation with the terrestrial Jedi data that Thomas was just talking about. And then I also had the incredible opportunity to go back to South Africa on a co-op term independently. And so I just want to share my experience about that as well, kind of following up with research done on the course. So you can go to the next. So this is the basic experimental design that we were following. Sorry, that's the next slide. But like, this is where all the camera traps are around Skukuza, which is where we were staying. And then we also maintenance some camera traps up in Pafuri, which is on the northern end of the Kruger National Park, as well as the Thorny Bush Nature Reserve in the Greater Kruger area. So there were many different plots we were looking at. And these were all at different water pans because we were looking at the movement of animals over the landscape. So the experimental design we were following throughout the course and after was basically taking a pan and placing a camera facing towards the water pan to capture all the animal movement as the animals were using it for drinking and bathing. And then we would double pace 25 meters back into the bush following a game trail that we saw and place the camera facing the same direction to try to capture these animals moving in and out. And then the third camera in the sequence would be 50 meters beyond the second one on the same game trail. So it wasn't an exact sort of science, but we basically were just trying to maximize the probability of capturing animals moving across the landscape, as well as capturing them actually using the pans close to the site. So the next slide is, so I just wanted to show, this is the Stevenson Hamilton site that I went back and maintenanced again. And so I just wanted to highlight how I was collecting the data because there's quite a lot of different things you have to think about and gather, like the camera serial number, the SD card number, where it was collected from, any notes about it. And so there was just like a lot of information to take down in the field. And so I was using a tool called CyberTracker to basically keep track of all this information, which allows you to design a program within a computer and ask yourself a series of questions, which then you can just take out your phone in the field and go through and collect data like that. And you don't need to be connected to cell service. It just uploads when you get back. So, and then it puts it all in this nice spreadsheet for you. So it was a really cool tool to use. And I just wanted to highlight some of the challenges using camera traps as well in the field, especially in a savanna ecosystem where you have megafauna. A lot of the cameras we came across were disappeared because of flooding, crushed by elephants, or eaten by hyenas. That one was just face down in water for months. So when I opened it up and tried to fix it, it was totally corroded. But then you can also see in the field, just as a backup method to the CyberTracker, I also just took photos of each camera with the serial number present and the 2 SD cards. So I could just kind of have a reminder and make sure that my data was all collected properly. And then I just wanted to show some of the images that we actually captured on these cameras. So these cameras were collected from a grid of cameras near Skukuza. And it was in kind of an experimental design that we aren't using for the study anymore. But we just wanted to see the effects of fire on the region and the change in animal use. So you can see just how biodiverse this area is. Like, these cameras were all collected within the same kilometer. And it's also really cool because we are also trying to do mark recapture with these kinds of camera trap imaging. Due to the palate markings on leopards, we can actually see if the same leopard has gone through the same area over and over again. So that was really cool to try to look through the images and see actual individual animals using the space and patrolling their territory. And then there's also just a lot of rare species, like aardvark was really cool to see in an image, a honey badger, hippo, caracal. So it just really shows you how many animals are using these spaces. So then I just wanted to kind of move on to my experience as a field research assistant going back. So within the first 5 days of the course, I was already wondering how I could go back. And just because of how amazing the initial experience was. So I found that networking during the course was a really important factor to that. Talking with a lot of the people who worked at Skukuza Science Leadership Initiative, as well as just around South African national parks. And then I also just wanted to put up some funding opportunities that I used to basically create funding to go back. And so these are really great resources if you're interested in kind of doing a similar international work thing. But yeah, these are just some of the other projects I worked on. I really loved that I had a lot of flexibility and freedom to work on basically whatever project sounded interesting. So there was a bunch of different projects that were being run by researchers at Skukuza Science Leadership Initiative. And because the work I was doing for David, looking at the cameras and making sure they were up to date, really only took up about a month of my time there, I was able to participate in a lot of other different tree studies, as well as the Women in Science course that's run annually through Organization for Tropical Studies. So just to highlight, this is up north in Bafuri. We went to this site on the course, and I went back there on a week-long camping trip to basically fix up those cameras again and set out a few new ones around that area. This is me with Shedron. He was my game guard for a lot of the work around Skukuza. And this was a backpack that Lawrence made for me to basically carry the rebar camera trap stands. I could fit about 5 at a time. And then this is also up north with Chianeo. She was kind enough to take off time and use her off days to come up camping with me to the north so that I didn't have to do all this field work by myself. So thank you, Chianeo. And then the last one. So this was, again, that camping trip. I got to drive around in a little manual rental that I learned how to drive with a NASA decal on it. So that was pretty cool. And then I was also doing some seed demography experiments with Lawrence, looking at seed survivability against rodents and bruchid beetles. So I built a bunch of these traps to basically isolate if the seeds were being eaten by rodents or bruchid beetles. And then this was from the Women in Science course led by Chianeo. And it basically involved 3 selected environmental science students from South Africa. It's completely funded by Organization for Tropical Studies. And the work that we did on the course was over the course of 10 days. We went up to Mapangubwe National Park and we surveyed 500 georeferenced baobabs as part of a 20-year long study. So it was really, really interesting to be a part of something that has data going back to 2005 and just going and sampling those trees again and seeing how much the elephants had damaged the bark and cambium. Oh yeah, okay. I forgot there was another slide. Anyway, so this is just a baobab tree from that experience as well. This was when I was surveying adult knobthorn acacias as part of the population demography studies with in tandem with the seed studies as well. And then this was me standing inside a baobab tree. The elephants basically gouge out the bark for moisture, and they'll kind of just rip down the branches and eat the tree alive, basically. And so there's so many photos of all of us just standing within these huge trees in this ecosystem. But yeah, that's kind of it, I think.
Thank you. So that's a little overview of some of the stuff we did there. I'm incredibly proud of the people there and really proud of the backup we received from UBC. I think the combination of the faculty backup, the people in forestry, but also Go Global. It's the best study abroad program I've ever worked with, and I've worked with at least 8 internationally. ranging from Harvard through to a lot of others. This is a stunning team. But I just wanted to open it up and see if anyone had questions for the presenters, for Thomas in Beijing, or anyone here. Any follow-up questions?
What was your favorite animal that
fun facts fitting about them. They have like a 90% success rate for killing their prey, which is compared with lions at about 60%. So, and I mean, they're vicious. Like when I was back in South Africa the second time, I had gone to a sundowner, which is when you have a beer by the lake where all the hippos are. And as we came back, we saw some hyenas kind of patrolling outside the gate of the science center. And literally 30 minutes earlier, some other researchers staying there had a whole video of wild dogs just tearing an impala apart right in front of the gate. And I mean, they just eat them alive. Like they don't even kill them first. So it was really crazy. I'm sad I missed the actual firsthand experience, but we did see the hyenas fighting with them after. So that was cool.
Thank you.
So can you clarify this connection between the NASA project, the JEDIs, and so you're then correlating that to the camera traps and ground truthing wildlife? You're trying to estimate what is the best environment for different species. Is that pretty much?
Maybe I'll comment as well. So I'm directing a large long-term NASA project in South Africa on ecological forecasting. What we're doing is we're looking using a number of different satellites. We're using remote sensing and terrestrial data. We're looking at land use and land cover change over about 20 years. It's a gigantic area, 100,000 square kilometers, all in all, over 3 countries. And there are a number of management changes, like they stopped killing elephants in 1994. With the end of apartheid, they stopped the elephant culling program. They've been taking down fences and shutting down artificial watering holes over huge areas. So those management changes have had impact on vegetation and habitat. Climate change is also having a major impact. So we're using 2 sources. We're using terrestrial data and remote sensing to see the change immediately and over long term. Immediately with the JEDI satellite, which is a LiDAR-based satellite that looks at vegetation structure and biodiversity, and then camera traps, which look at animal occupancy. So to sum it up, what we're looking at is the way that land cover is impacting, changes in land cover is impacting and will impact in future animal habitat. What does it mean, for instance, that we're getting increasing amounts of woody vegetation, increasingly thorny? Well, if you're a cheetah, it becomes more and more difficult to hunt, for instance. So it's a long-term project, and the data we're collecting, that these guys have been collecting, is the terrestrial data. Plus, we are ground truthing what the satellite sees. JEDI is a very new satellite. It's only been up for a couple of years. It's now being stored on the International Space Station while the American Defense Program takes over the space station. It'll be reactivated in 2 years' time. What it's good at is tropical forests with a very dense canopy. What it is bad at is the rest of the world. In other words, savannas especially. We get a lot of bare ground. So the information we're collecting, ground truthing the waveform from the NASA satellites, the JEDI satellite, that pass over the areas where we're doing our study abroad program, is critical to training that instrument and understanding what it's seeing, basically. That's the when Thomas was talking about RH98, the percentage energy returns, that's what he's talking about. We're trying to develop technologies and techniques to train something that's not designed for savannas, how to see savannas. So it's a really exciting project.
So you're using the students as cheap labor to collect the data there, right? Fantastic. No, that's great.
I've done a lot. I've done a lot of science in the field with undergraduate students. This is one of the most sophisticated, and they really performed incredibly. They did unbelievably well. The Jedi. I mean, okay, look, I'm not a remote sensing person, and my wife Melissa is much better in the field with some of this stuff than I am. So you will agree, I know, that when I'm the guy who does the general stuff, the ecology, the history. I can work in the field a lot. I've spent my life carrying a large rifle in the field in Africa. But Melissa is a total fascist about methodologies. So I had you guys walking with tapes and measuring it out. And she arrived 3 days later. She said, "What are you doing? Tell them how to pace." Because with a tape, you've got to walk through all the damn thorn bushes. I don't know if you've got any comments on that.
Well, I mean, that brings back a memory of us at the Lataba rest camp, and Melissa just laid out like 100 meters on the tape and basically had us walk back and forth across measuring our double pacing until we got an exact average of accumulation of 5 different runs.
Yeah, and there's it's really, I have 2 mics now, it's weird. But there was a lot we had to really take for this Jedi project. It wasn't just, pacing, and we had to find all of the different quadrants of all of the different species that were in it, and measure the heights, and it was a lot. But it's very similar to forest work as well, forestry work. A lot of people surveying, that is what they do on a day-to-day. I did that Colorado, just measuring tree heights and all that. So it was very relatable to be okay, I'm gonna definitely be able to take that and take it into my future jobs and stuff. So it was awesome in that way that I could. No way. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. There's a chat question, I think.
Oh, it's a little bit. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Of your experiences through this program,
You want to go for that?
No,
Go ahead.
wait.
Roberta's applying for masters right now.
Yeah, I was really inspired about everything we did there, and I wanted to go back to Brazil to research savannas back in Brazil and compare. But maybe I'll do this in the future. Right now I'm applying for a master's, which I'll also be using camera traps and using the things that I learned there. So yeah, it really does influence our future choices. And I think none of us leaves the program without having our minds constantly thinking about it, and any aspect of it, it really impacts every one of us in a different way too. But yeah, it definitely impacts us.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, like I said, I did work in Colorado in the grasslands, but coming to South Africa and being in savannas, I really fell in love even more with savanna ecosystems, and I think that's where I want to probably go with research, especially with fire and grass. And yeah, I think that's probably I again don't know what I'm doing with my life, which is a thing that most people are graduating and doing, but it definitely really inspired me to want to come back at least, or continue with that biome at least.
Yeah, I feel honestly, a lot of the research opportunities that are advertised, at least in North America, are so competitive and extremely formal. But I think the biggest thing about going back was just how informal, oh, you want to come help on this project? Great, we're going in the field at 7. And I think it's just it was such an incredible experience to just do field work day after day and just be in such a different ecosystem where you could kind of apply the concepts that we've learned in forestry 210 and 211 and whatever into what we were doing.
Yeah, and I guess just to chime in,
Yeah, Thomas?
for me, because I think well, I'm applying for planning schools, so I feel like it's not like too directly connected to all the stuff we did. But what I loved about this whole experience the most is like you go through an entire process of like learning a whole new methodology from beginning to end, and by the end like you're really well versed in it, that you start making like small modifications to it to make it more efficient, all that stuff. Like you go through an entire cycle of like a component of research, which I think is really important in any future endeavors, like whether that's school or work. So yeah, that's my takeaway from the course.
I think it's a really good point. I think that what Ella was referring to now is important to me as well. Going out there, this is an area where, I mean, this is my home, and I've worked out there for 30 years with communities out there. The base we stay at is not open to tourists. It's not in a tourist area, and it's a major center for international science. But what is really critical is the informality of this. So you go there. I remember one time I was doing bird surveys with a colleague of mine, and we had a whole lot of students with us, and we were looking at the interaction between mega herbivores and birds. Elephants kick up a lot of insects, and particular types of birds, the ones that swoop and hover, will hawk around an elephant or a rhino or even a hippo. They'll catch the grasshoppers and things that are disturbed. So we're doing this, and we're watching, we're doing bird surveys. And one of the students said to me, "Oh, that's really cool. I wonder what happens at night." "What do you mean at night?" "Yeah, because mega herbivores move at night, right?" "Well, they're not birds really moving at night, but they're bats." And that was the beginning of a series of major papers in which the scientists looked at the relationship between bats and elephants, bats hawking around elephants at night. Just a little thing, but the informality of it, that one thing triggers another thing. And, you're without I have to say, you're without a lot of the strictures that are often present in, say, the American National Park system. There's a lot of delightful experimentation that goes on. People will say, well, fire is the major driver. We've had these fire experiments for 40 years. It's the longest fire experiment system in savannas anywhere in the world. But we've never had really high intensity fires. Let's light a firestorm. So anyway, yeah. But I mean, that informality is, I think, very instructive about the way innovation enters science. So, yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I'm just kind of curious how these things happen. Like, do they treat it as a food, or they just feel it as a strata, this kind of thing?
Good question.
So the hyenas and the elephants, like, I think are just smarter than like the rest of the animals. So sometimes you get like an impala standing in front of a camera for like an hour, like grooming, and you just get like millions of images and it has no idea that anything's like going on. But the hyenas, like, pretty much like the last image on all the cameras that are eaten by hyenas is like a hyena or an elephant trunk, like really close up, like over it. So I think they just know somehow that it's like a human disturbance in the ecosystem, and hyenas have the strongest jaw of like any like animal basically. So they can just completely crush it in their mouth. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Is it the sound? I thought it was the sound about. Yeah. Yeah. But
yeah, you're right. You use a lot of cameras for what? Yeah. Yeah. In certain areas, we lost a whole different cameras. But one other thing that's just worth bearing in mind, and that is this program really reinforces the new emphasis sorry, this program really reinforces the emphasis that is coming out of forestry, and that is the focus on Africa. There's a major grant that we've got now, which is funding African scholars, African doctoral students coming to UBC, to forestry. But I think it's also important to realize that this is an opportunity for exchange. The base we have out there is incredibly well equipped. It's wonderful, as you guys will testify. We have a number of different bases. The one in the north, I started 30 years ago. The other one is a National Science Foundation funded base, SSLI. Vehicles, game guards, everything. And what we're hoping is that we can have a kind of exchange with UBC faculty and students going out more often, working on long-term projects in Southern Africa. There's a lot of work to be done, really exciting opportunities. So this, I think, is one of I hope it's the beginning of that. Yeah.
I was wondering what the difference is and what you saw in your experience between community-led conservation efforts versus governmentally led conservation efforts, because to the best of my knowledge, Kruger National Park is an area defined by the government, but within it there's a whole bunch of community-led conservation efforts, you mentioned the black mambas. So I was wondering the difference in those and how you guys kind of play into that role.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just touch on that. We had an incredible lecture by Louisa Schwemmer. She's a economic and social researcher with South Africa National Parks, but she works closely with the national parks and the people outside of it, the locals, indigenous people. And I should have mentioned it in my slides, but she was really inspirational to me, especially because she's a crazy bridge and on of that, and the balance of conserving and what's that P word? Preservation, right? But also having the people use the sources that they've always had access to in the park. Was really, really cool. And they do that constantly. They have a lot of programs where they have people come in for free and get to use what they're used to using, the mopani worms. Those are the caterpillars. That is a staple for their food. And there's a lot of those trees, the mopani trees, that are closed off for them. But they do have programs for them to come in and harvest them and eat them and take them home. So I just love that lecture about that.
And even there are many programs with the community surrounding the park, because we learned a lot about park history with David. He told us a lot about differences in conservation management over the years and how things are changing for the better and more inclusive for the actual communities that used to live in the park. And now they can finally use it again in their ways. So we learned even about the bushmeat program that feeds many schools around bordering the park, and in a sustainable way, in a managed way. But everything they are slowly increasing this bond between the locals and governments, because the past was really rough for them, but now things are slowly improving on that. Yeah.
Well, it's with apartheid, within 30 years, it's just a history of displacement. And Kruger National Park historically was a whites only game reserve. So there's just a huge history of displacement within the park that I think David and Melissa touch on really well during the course, especially in the first few lectures. But even just in the example of the black mambas, I think the approaches to conservation are really different between the government ones and then the private reserves. And then a group like the black mambas really are preserving life for intrinsic value, while, the South African national parks and the private game reserves are really trying to prevent poaching because of touristic value. So it's really interesting, but the course totally goes through all the different methods of conservation within the greater Kruger area and the background and history. So, yeah.
That's an excellent question, and it is the subject of the course. There's some very different models. You've got it. That's really what we're interested in. And yeah, so thank you.
Finished. So thank you so much. Another round of applause. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. We'll see you in the next TLSS. It's in March. Fernanda Tomaselli will be here, delighting us with another fascinating topic. So thank you so much.